Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to The 3-Month Vacation. Yes, this podcast is called The 3-Month Vacation, but most of the time it's about working. We talk about strategies and systems and learning, but it's not often that we take you along with us on our holiday, or at least tell you stories about the holiday. So I was talking to this friend who came over for lunch, and one of the interesting things about the travel is that we stay in different hotels. One of the fun things about hotels is sometimes you stay in rooms where famous people have stayed. And the staff will say, hey, you stayed in Madonna's room, or that was Paul McCartney's room, which has happened to us. But as my friend pointed out, yeah, but you didn't get to meet them. The problem is that we don't realize that people are famous even when we encounter famous people. That's precisely what happened in Goa, India. We were staying at a colonial-era governor's residence, and as usual, I spent my mornings painting in watercolor. The staff had gotten very friendly with us, and they mentioned that the residence's owner would be visiting, and that he was an interesting person to speak to. Later that morning, someone walked in, smiled, waved, and then headed towards the owner's bungalow. We naturally assumed he was the owner. The next day, we started a conversation when we saw him again. We knew that he owned the place, but maybe he had some kind of other business. So the conversation went like this. What do you do? We asked. He hesitated. I make movies. I'm an actor. Our next logical question was, have you been in anything that we might know? At this point, his wife looked slightly embarrassed. Yes, he's quite well known, she said, and then turned to him and added, maybe they live in New Zealand, so they don't know about you. As it turned out, we had no idea who he was, and he didn't seem thrilled about that fact. After he left, Renuka, who had got his name, emailed it to her sister, who replied, oh yeah, that guy is really famous. He's in the movies, TV series, even on Netflix. That was our first faux pas. A few days later, I was painting at breakfast when another guest struck up a conversation. She mentioned she was an actress. The conversation soon drifted to her father, who had been the editor of a science magazine. It was Science Today. It was a magazine I grew up with. I was so excited because I loved reading it. We talked for quite a while about her father and her mother before she left. Once again, we just got her name, and they told us that she was famous. So Renuka emailed her sister, and the reply, whoa, she's really famous too. 2 famous people, and we had no clue. But that's not the end of the story. We left Goa, and we were in Mumbai when we spotted these giant billboards, which are 1 or 2 stories high. Who was on the billboard? Yes, the 2 people that we had met in Goa, in that hotel in Goa. Later on, I was to find out that the guy who was miffed about not being recognized, he had received one of India's highest honors. Maybe next time Madonna will sit next to us, or Paul McCartney, and maybe we will recognize them. Or it won't matter. That's the end of the first story. We've met some other people that we haven't recognized who turned out to be reasonably famous, but we'll leave it for now. We'll take us to our next story, which occurred in Singapore. And the first story was about meeting famous people. But sometimes you can become inadvertently famous. Well, not exactly famous, but you might attract some unexpected attention. This is that story. When I travel, I take thousands of photographs, many of them people at work. In Singapore, I walked past what looked like a salon and took a quick photo of someone inside. They were working, so I took that photo. When I'm taking a picture, I tend to hold my camera lower rather than bringing it up to my eyes. This creates a more dynamic angle and makes for a better picture. Sometimes I even bend down slightly to get the shot. In this case, I just lowered the camera down to my hip and took the picture. Then I started walking away. At this point, I noticed that someone was behind me and was filming us. It was clear he was following us, which made me feel uncomfortable. At this point, Renuka had no idea. So I told her to pick up the pace, told her that someone was following us and was also filming us. Not knowing his intentions, we ducked into a clothing store to avoid him. We waited a few minutes, and I even deleted the photograph just in case that was the issue, because sometimes people get funny about it. They go, "You shouldn't have taken that photograph, delete it." So okay, I deleted it. But when we stepped out, he was still following us. So we decided upon a strategy. Renuka knew another store quite well. She said we could enter through one doorway and exit through another at the back. We got into the store, we got to our escape door, and it was bolted shut. Through the corner of my eye, I saw the men approaching, and they looked ominous. They identified themselves as owners of the salon and demanded to know why I was filming the salon. I explained that I wasn't filming, just taking a photo, but they weren't interested in the photo. I was taken aback because people usually just want you to delete the photo. These guys were not interested in the picture. They had a completely different agenda. They insisted that it was illegal to take photos of stores in Singapore, something they just made up to keep the pressure on. They then grilled us for the next few minutes, convinced that we were competitors trying to steal secrets. Eventually, things calmed down when we asked them to check my website. As you probably know, I have a photography site at theotherseandesouza.com, and once they saw those photos, they started to chill a bit. They realized that I was just a photographer, but they were still not convinced. We had to show them that we weren't locals. We had our passports. We had our itinerary. They scanned the itinerary as well to make sure that we were really tourists taking photos. Finally, they believed us. We shook hands and even agreed to meet again for a coffee. Is there a moral to the story? I don't know, but here is the odd part. When I walked past the same salon the following day, I noticed it had a huge glass window. Anyone, at any time of the day or night, could take the same picture. And yet, for some reason, they singled us out as spies. So that was our moment of being mildly famous. And here's the kicker. The guy filmed me, but I also took a few pictures of him because I wanted to show him that I take excellent photographs. So yes, I have pictures of him as well. So there you go. That takes us to the third story. And this is not directly about our travels, but it's about people we know, including clients. Yep, sometimes we'll tell you our stories, and sometimes another story is so much more interesting. This is the story about Ronak Patani and how he traveled to Australia. Originally from India, but raised in the UK, Ronak's childhood dreams was to attend the Boxing Day cricket match at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Ronak was travelling alone and found himself at a bar in Melbourne. There he struck up a conversation with the bartender. When he mentioned his reason for visiting, the bartender was so impressed that he told Ronak, "I have a little gift for you. If you come back the next day, I think you'll be quite happy with the surprise." Yes, Ronak had flown halfway across the world to watch one cricket match, one game as it were. But what was this surprise about? So he showed up the next day, and the bartender wasn't around. That was the surprise? It wasn't. When he spoke to the bartender on duty, The other guy nodded and he handed Ronak a package. Inside the box was a pair of well-worn shoes. When Ronak first met with the bartender had asked about Ronak's shoe size. Now, here in this box was a pair of shoes in that exact size. However, they weren't new shoes, but rather well-worn and seemingly from a different age. What was the connection? As it turned out, these were the shoes of legendary fast bowler Dennis Lillee. If you're not a cricket fan, this might not mean much, but Lillee was one of the greatest fast bowlers of his time and the second fastest in the world. It was an incredible piece of cricket history given to Ronak purely because of a random conversation in a random bar in Australia, which is a random country. You can imagine how thrilled Ronak was. And he'll probably be telling this story and showing off those shoes for the rest of his life. And Ronak came back as a PS to the story and said that he looks at the shoes at least once a week and has told the story to his friends and his family. What was even more interesting was the bartender, Jack, was asked by the Australian Sports Museum if they could buy the shoes from him. Jack declined. He just decided he wanted to give them to a real fan. And that was Ronak. And with that, we come to the end of this episode. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. People often ask us how we manage to sell so many products when we don't do much social media or any social media. We don't have any advertising, and very occasionally, we'll do a joint venture. And the reason why we're able to sell the products is, we get clients in, but then we create an elaborate system of pre-sale. Now, you've gone to a sales page. Everybody's been to a sales page if you're listening to this podcast. And you've bought something off that sales page. But people associate the sales page as something that's amazing, and that once they have the sales page, they should make a sale. But what really matters is all the things you have to do, or rather, how you have to build up a strategy so that you can sell on that day. Think of it as a wedding. How do all of these people show up from different parts of the country or even the world at a specific spot at that time? It's part of a strategy. It's part of a build-up. And the same concept, the same idea applies to a product or a service. If you don't do all of that groundwork, then on the day that you release your product, you might have a brilliant sales page and nothing will happen. So this is pre-sale. And if you would like to find out more about pre-sale, go to psychotactics.com and there are goodies. The goodies enable you to judge in advance whether this product is good for you because, hey, you want to know for sure. So even if you're driving or walking, remember, it's pre-sale. So go to psychotactics.com/pre-sale. The release is on the 28th of May. And remember, this is still very early in the year. So pre-sale is happening to you right now. Go to psychotactics.com/pre-sale and judge for yourself. And with that, we come to the end of this podcast. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? Okay, here's another story. It's from Toulouse. We were in France, in Toulouse, in November of 2024, and we'd booked this place. It was spacious on the third floor, troisième étage, and we had a grand view of the main square. I could even find enough sockets for all the devices that we need to plug in. But we weren't exactly happy with the room. The bed was from a different age and seemed 100 or more years old. I lay down on it and my feet touched the rim. We were booked at this hotel for a week, and I didn't fancy curling up every night just so I could get some sleep. However, the biggest problem was the squeaky floors. I wake up early and tiptoe across the room to avoid waking Renuka. I would not be able to do my early morning walk with every strip of wood creaking and groaning at 5 a.m. We discussed what to do next, and usually when a room doesn't suit us, we just go ahead with this plan. We ask for another room. We were met with confused looks when we got down to the reception and made our request. Only then did we find out why the floors creaked and why the room felt like it was from the last century. It was because it was indeed from the last century. It was the room of an aviator called Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Born in 1900, he flew for the Aéropostale, delivering mail across dangerous routes in Africa and South America. In Toulouse, which was a significant hub for Aéropostale, Saint-Exupéry often stayed at this hotel on Place du Capitole. This historic hotel was a popular spot for Aéropostale pilots, and we were staying in the same room. But there was a secondary surprise. We didn't know that this aviator was also the author of the book, The Little Prince, which has sold over 140 million copies, making it one of the biggest bestsellers ever. Even today, almost a century later, between 2 to 5 million copies are sold annually. Can you see why the staff at the reception thought that we were mad? Yes, we have stayed in rooms where Madonna or Paul McCartney have been. However, they just happen to be rooms in which some famous people spent time. This Toulouse room was restored to feel like we'd been transported back in time, and we wanted some average room instead. Well, we've done a lot of name dropping on this article, but mostly it underlines that we're clueless. That's the recurring theme. We meet people we don't recognize. We can't even figure out when we have a nice room. And I have to say, though, there were enough sockets to charge the devices, and the view from the hotel room, it was exceptionally nice. And that's it for now. By the time you listen to this podcast, we will be in Rajasthan in North India. We'll have some more travel stories for you when we get back. Bye for now, and check out those goodies at psychotactics.com/presale. Bye-bye.